Life is sweet. Let it sweep you off your feet.
Hi, it's Ali and Find Your Joy. Please do remember to like and subscribe. So I think this is going to be part 2. Who knows how far this will go? Last episode, I was talking about dreams and visions and a wee bit more. And I'm going to continue on that path. And I think I'm just going to explore that a little bit, and I hope that you will come along for the ride. I think it kind of started for me. Always, like as a child, I would dream a lot. I would always dream that I could fly. I would know things before they happened. And I didn't fully understand that. I would just get things in my mind, and some things, like for years before my dad and mom split up, I would be saying to my dad, "You and mom are going to get a divorce." And this was back in the early 60s. I mean, people weren't discussing such things. And he would say, "No, no, 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 sweetie, you don't need to worry about that." And then one day I just said, I know you're going to. And he said, "Yeah, I can't lie to you. I mean, yeah, we are going to." And I remember running downstairs and being really mad at my mom and saying, you know, "Oh man," as a kid does, anyways, being mad at my mom that my dad was leaving and she didn't know yet. He hadn't told her about that. Anyways, the things we do. So it would be things like that, or I had a recurring dream, awake or asleep, about alien visitation stuff. When I was little, I it went so far that there was a smaller craft that came down from the larger craft, and it would it would land in our neighbor, Mrs. Brecken. Mrs. Brecken lived beside us on Rochester, and it would land in her backyard. And the thing would start to open up, and then that would always be the door, and as if someone was coming out of that. And that would always be the last thing I would remember. And then it would be the next day. And this happened repeated times. In fact, one time it happened and I ran downstairs and told my mom about it. Now, it's so funny because it seems odd to me. I actually had a counselor years later and I was telling her about the situation. And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, what did your mom do?" I ran downstairs and said, "Mom, the flying saucer is back." And she said, "Well, what did she do?" I said, "Well, she just got me to crawl into bed beside her and said I was having a bad dream." And I was like, "I'm not dreaming. There's a flying saucer in the," and she said, "And what did did she get up and show, and so you could show her?" And I said, "No, she got me to go into, crawl into bed beside her and go to sleep." She said, "So no one ever came to even just to show you that you were wrong? Like they didn't come to see if you were correct or to tell you, here, no, this is, you're wrong and here's why?" I said, "No." But like I said, it was the 60s, and there wasn't a lot of that going around. My mom was, a pretty awesome person, but I guess that's just how she saw that. I would wake up and the smell of bananas would be so strong in my room, or that's the only thing that I could compare it to. This was really funny. That same counselor many years later, she showed me this book of alien encounters, and it was around that the smell of bananas had often been reported. Was there such things? I have no memory of anything outside of that. I have no memory of being taken away, probed, anything happening. I have no recollection of any of that. Just this recurring awake sometimes, asleep sometimes, dreamlike thing that would happen. I wonder if that's going to muddy the waters of everything else I'm going to talk about. But these were just things that would happen. In my dreams, I would dream I could fly. I always dreamt I could fly. In fact, I was probably, I don't know how old I was, 5, 6 years old or something. And I had tied different things onto my arms to make them like wings. And we had a 3-story house, big house on Rochester, at Rochester. And I had crawled out my window and I was standing on the edge of my roof. I'm like, this is a true story. And my mom was outside in the backyard and like, she goes, "What are you doing?" And I believed that I was going to jump off my roof and fly. I was always jumping out of trees. Because I was convinced. As I got older, I stopped doing those things. I didn't stop having the dreams, but my belief I was actually going to be able to do that diminished, thankfully. Probably gravity taught me that. Um, but yeah, I would have these dreams, and I would see things before they might happen. And I was kind of a quirky kid. That was probably how I would describe it. I was best probably on my own. Um, and I just had these dreams, and they would often come true. And I had visions, and I had pretend make-believe friends, and these things would happen. I was also a kid that was experiencing trauma, so I think that, even though we didn't know that at the time, or I knew that at the time, but it wasn't being divulged. I think that's what I put a lot of that stuff off to. Now, as I got older, and as I spoke about last time, after my Nana passed away, she came and visited me. I had different things that would happen. I would have odd little, I don't know. I suddenly just wrote a poem about when I was about 9 years old. The 9th of June was a fiery night. We tipped our guns and chuckled through our fright, stared at men as young as we, and wondered, will I kill him, or will he kill me? Goes on and on and on. I have this poem that I wrote, and it was a very detailed account of being a soldier in a war and being killed. And I was like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old when I wrote that. So I had like a series of these things. Now, some people will say, well, that's proof that you lived other lives. I'm not really in that camp myself. Of course, I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows for sure. There's a whole bunch of us who think we know something, but or we can believe something or suspect something, but nobody really knows anything. I don't really fall in that camp. I'm not really sure what that's all about. I can just tell you, gosh, I hope that reincarnation, I hope that that's not what it was, but I was always something was going on with me, even from a really young age. And I would just experience things in a different way. One time, this time I would have been in my 20s, and I can remember there was a guy that I knew. I'd known him he was a friend of somebody that I was with at the time. And he came and he was looking at me, and all of a sudden I had this clear picture, and it was like a movie was playing in front of me. And I didn't have a lot of training yet in what I would later learn to be either psychic training or prophetic training or intuitive training. I didn't have a lot of training or understanding depth of what it could be to just blurt out what I saw. That's a whole other thing. I used to, later in my life, I took many courses, and then I was asked to develop a course, and I did that, and I would teach on it. And maybe I'll be doing that again. But for right now, I can just say I didn't have a lot of training at that time. So here was this guy, and his name is John, and he was in our living room, and I just get this flash come before me. And it was very specific. It was a kitchen with yellow and orange. Kind of reminded me of my kitchen when I was a kid in Coquitlam, which is what first caught my attention about it all. But there was a separate flight of stairs that I didn't have at my house, and in that flight of stairs that this guy had some very unkindness. There was this his father drank, and it was a picture of something that was very unpleasant. But I shared it with him. I said, hey, this is what I see. I didn't ask his permission to do that or anything, because I didn't know yet. I would see things and I would just blurt them out. So I said, hey, this is what I see. And he was just like frozen, because what I had described was in absolute detail his kitchen, the stairs that went upstairs from that, and then an incident that had occurred where his father had come home drunk and beat him up. And so me seeing that, I didn't have the depth of knowledge to know what to do with that. Was it to be shared? Was it to be something that I was to hold on to and maybe understand him better? Maybe that was that. I didn't offer him any solace. There was no comfort I was offering him. I was just telling him what I saw. I would see these things like a movie in my head. And so from there, I would have other experiences, and that would come and he would ask me about that. But I guess why I'm saying that is that's one thing that just came to me, and I'm really doing this off the fly. I'm telling you, I have not prepared what I'm going to talk about. How surprising, right? But no, I didn't prepare for any of this. I just thought it's time to share it, and I'm just going to trust that things will come up that need to come up. So why I think that story came up to me today is because, like in most of my stories, I don't look so great. So that is just one little snippet of a time when I was given a vision that was something that someone had experienced in their life. It was given to me with so much detail that he knew that it was true, because right down to, every color that was in the house, every placement of the stairwell, everything that happened, the experience. Um, okay, so I saw those things, but here's what I've learned that was much more important. And this is around, I think, finding my joy. And sometimes finding our joy is we trip and we fall and we do things wrong a lot of times, way before we get to the place where we can be of service to others. Because I don't think I was serving him that day. I don't think I served that young man. I think that I had a gift, have a gift, didn't know much about it at that time. And I think at that time, really, if I'm being honest, and I've said this before, sometimes when we have second sight, or whatever we want to call that, it's knowing how to use it and when to use it and why to use it and when not to use it and why not. And at that time, I didn't really understand what this gift is for. And so me just relaying to him a painful experience he'd had without being invited into it. He hadn't said to me, hey, do you have second sight or prophetic gifting or revelatory gifting, or are you a psychic, or whatever we want to call this? He hadn't asked me any of that. We're just sitting there talking. All of a sudden it came before me. And I'm going to suggest that a lot of people that walk in this same type of gifting, which I think we all do to varying degrees, and then we can pursue it or not. I know now, I don't just blurt those things out. Like, I didn't ask me to do that, and I didn't know what that message was for yet. Now, this is like 40 years ago, so I can't go back and figure out exactly. If I sat down and tried to think about it, I could probably come up with some reasons about why I might have been shown that vision. But the reality was I didn't know. So here's something: if you're listening right now and you're new in this, or maybe you don't even know you're new in it, let's make sure we're not stroking our own ego. Make sure that we're not comforting our own insecurities. Let's make sure we're not just trying to be right. There's a whole bunch of things that come with second sight that we need to work through our own insecurities and our own needs first before we can be of any service. So if we're still out there and we're still just blurting things out without being invited, we're still saying things without really checking to make sure that this time is right and all of those things. These are things that we need to learn and to navigate and negotiate and to learn and to really get down. It's like the sandpaper until it's smooth, it's not time. If I was making someone a table, I'm not going to give it to them when it's still bumpy and scratchy. I'm going to take the sandpaper and wait till it's smooth, and it's the right time, and it's the right time to give the gift. So those are some of the things that I learned along the way. I've had other times when I did it, it was really quick, that I'll never know. Like, for instance, one time I was about, I don't know, 16 years old or something. My brother Bruce was still living in Ontario then. And I woke up from a dream and I saw very clearly him in a car accident. And so I phoned him and asked him not to go out that day. And he didn't. And he wasn't in an accident. So how do we check that one, right? He didn't go out. He listened to me and didn't go out. But it wasn't like he went out and was in a near accident and saw it coming because of what I said. So those are some of the reasons when I felt like there was a warning that I would get for someone, that I would give that information, and that seemed to be one of the reasons that maybe I would have this thing that would be coming. But it's what I've learned is that it's really important to make sure that that person, first of all, wants to receive what I have to share, and always to remember that every message that we get comes through a very broken, wounded vessel. That's us. So we receive information. The Bible would call it, we know in part and see in part. Other ways of learning about this would be that we only get what we get, and we don't have a clear vision of what all that means. We see through a glass, and it's dimly. What we can see isn't clear. And if anybody is thinking that they are seeing this and they know exactly what it's about and they know exactly what it's for, I would challenge you on that and say, perhaps that might be correct. And perhaps we see something and we're not really sure what it is, but we often, if we're not careful, deliver that as a fact rather than a feeling or a thought or an imagination or a wondering. And that's sort of where I've come to now. When I see things, even when I feel quite certain about what I'm seeing, I'm very cautious, because everything comes through this. This is the vessel that is going to deliver that message. And this is also the vessel that is going to try to interpret that message. And we want to always make sure that we don't have our ego or our insecurity or whatever that is be the thing that is the middleman for those messages. I have been on the receiving end of people giving me messages that I didn't invite, and there's no place in me that can kind of land, and I can go, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. That's why I receive that. Most people who are very seasoned have taken the time to take courses or be mentored or something like that. They tend to, you'll recognize them by their fruit. They will tend to come in a little bit low, meaning with humility, wanting to make sure that it's the right time for you to even hear that message, if it's even a message at all. Sometimes we're energetic beings, right? So it's all energy. If I think about it, okay, so I'm a person that has a lot of high energy in me for whatever reason this is. And I go, there's this thrifty store by me, not far from where we live. And I go, and every time I touch anything metal in that store, I swat. It gets this, you hear this pop really loud. I get a shock. So sometimes you'll see people will be around and they get a shock. Maybe you get a shock, maybe you don't get a shock. But that shock, that little zap of energy, is just that. It's just a chain, energy from one spot coming to another. It's just very noticeable when it's you and it snaps your finger and it hurts like heck. So we're all energy, and our thoughts are energy, and our bodies are energy, and our words are energy. What we speak out goes out into the great cosmos, into the world, into people's ears, into their bodies. We speak healing to them, or we speak curses to them. It's all energy. And so that's how sound therapy, sound vibrational therapy works, because it's an energy coming in through. That's how, acupuncture is, it goes along the meridians and the energy travels along there, and that's how it works. That's how if someone has just had a heart attack and you put the paddles on them and zap, It is energy coming through. It's electricity, it's energy, it's a form of energy. And so when we pick up messages, when we walk into a room and we say, notice something, and here's something that even if a person doesn't think that they have any second sight or energetic sensitivity or psychic or revelatory or prophetic or whatever we're going to call it today, you walk into a room. And I know I've used this example before. I can't remember if I've done it on here or not. You're going to a party at someone's house, a dinner party or something. You're the first to arrive, and the couple is busy getting things ready. Hi, welcome, come on in, and everyone's smiling, and the place looks fabulous. But there's a tension, and the tension is so tangible. It's thick, and it just like baps you in the head. You can just feel the tension. Even though they're smiling, you can feel that they've just had an argument. They're smiling and trying to be great about it, but there's a tension still there. It's just energy. You're not magic. It's nothing foo-foo. It's just how energy works. And if you think of when you take two magnets and try to put them together, and you can feel the tension in between it, it's just a magnetic force. It's just another type of energy. Why am I just driving this home so much? It's because I guess it matters to me that people understand. I mean, I can say that I think something's magical and wonderful, and it is, and it's lovely, and maybe that's even the word that we'll stick onto it and let it stay there for a while. But it's not magic as in my view, to be clear. It is not magic as in something unexplainable or something that isn't heard of or something that anyone needs to fear if they fear magic. What it is just an exchange of energy, or we come into a space where we can feel that energy. And whether that energy is electrical and we get a zap, or it's magnetic and we feel that pulse, or it's vibrational and I play my gong and you can feel the energy. I can't see it, but I can feel it. It's much like wind. I can look and I don't see wind. I see the impact of wind. I can see the trees blowing. I can see a piece of paper on the ground floating along. I can see the waves rippling. I can see hair blowing, but I don't see the wind. I see the impact of the wind. And so much of when we have second sight, here we go, right? Revelatory, prophetic, intuitive, psychic, whatever we're calling it, it's an energy. And so we can feel the impact of the energy. We might not see the energy. And if we tend to be someone who is in tune to that, or has maybe quite a bit of gifting in that area, that energy becomes much clearer or more evident, profound, a little harder to ignore. Because sometimes, and I'll tell you about that in a bit, sometimes it gets so much. For me, it got so intense that I asked for it to stop. I asked the gift to stop. I asked the visions to stop. I asked whatever is happening here. I closed it down as much as I could, because for a time, it just became way too much for me. And that's what I did. And slowly I've been allowing that to come back in, because I think it's an important part of who I am and what I was created for, who I was created. It's something to serve with, as long as we do it respectfully, with humility, and always kindness and love. I can remember a time that someone came. I didn't understand what I saw. I'm going to tell this. There was a person who came to meet with me for another reason, but this happened to be a person who was a musician that I really respected, but I'd never met that person. This person was a friend of a friend. But I knew that person. This person was meeting with me for another reason, a business thing. And I met with them, I'm going to say with good intentions to hear about the business, but for sure a part of me was, probably a little starstruck, because not that that person was a huge star, but in my eyes, what they did was pretty fabulous. But what happened was, when I was sitting with that person, I saw tombstones in their eyes. Now, that should never have been words that left my mouth. And yet they did. And this was a person who was going through a really difficult time. And probably what I was shown that for, I'm just guessing, because I was way too immature to have figured this all out, but it was probably so that I would pray for them, because there was a death that they were experiencing, or something dead inside of them, or something needed to be called back to life, or I don't really know. I don't know, because I was so immature in my gifting at the time that all that happened was I saw that and I kept staring at that, and then the words left my mouth, and that energy went out over that person. So this person who was already going through this very challenging time that I wasn't aware of, their friend was, and was very sad that when I had told this person that I spoke those words. And I'm very sad, even today, that I did speak those words. But this is what I saw. I saw tombstones in their eyes. And I spoke those words, and then watched the impact of those words on that person's face. They were a much more mature and gracious person than I, and they handled it as well as could be expected. And I never saw that person again. But those are the kinds of things that can happen when we have second sight, or prophetic, or psychic, or revelatory, or intuitive, or whatever we're calling it these days. And I'll just keep saying that. Is that to be so mindful of that, because we don't, first of all, I didn't know what I saw what I saw, but I didn't know the full meaning. I saw in part. I didn't have the story behind it. I didn't have the relevance behind it. I didn't know where that person was at that moment. And I spoke out those words anyway. And I released that energy, because our words have energy. They have a power to bless or curse. Whatever our faith background is, whatever that might be, whether I believe in a biblical God, or if I believe in the power of a universe, or I believe in manifestation, or whatever it is I believe, I surely know that my words have the power to bless or curse. I can use different words to uplift or to bring down, however that is. So these are some of the things that when I'm talking about this stuff is to really remember that we see in part and we know in part, and it all comes through this vessel that is damaged at best. Even in our most healed moments, there is always an opportunity that what I'm seeing is not exactly. I might see a boat, but it doesn't mean I'm supposed to go fishing. Maybe the boat is about floating. Maybe the boat is about a trip somewhere. Maybe the boat is about safety from water. Maybe the boat is, who knows what the boat is. But for me to assume I know without further investigation, and even then without permission to speak it out, it's something that we need to be really cautious with. So if there was a time when we live in the house that we live in now, and it is it came with its fair share of interesting interesting experiences, for me mostly. There is a person who has done mapping about portals around the world, and it turned out about a year into what was happening with me, that I was given this information from this group of people that where we live is one of those portals. Now, I'd been told by people when I started to share about my experiences, oh yeah, kayakers go like take a wide berth around that place because it's been known to be like the vortex or something weird there. I'll just say that there was many things that I saw. I actually went to a psychologist and said, I think there's something very wrong with me because I'm hearing and seeing things that are I don't understand. I could hear things like babies crying. I would see people that were lost looking for a place. I could see pictures and movies in my head of violence that had occurred, and really violent, horrible, horrific things happening. And it took me a very long time. It undid me. And I spoke to healthcare professionals. I did, like, I thought I'd lost it because I had been seeing things my whole life, but nothing like when we moved here. And a really beautiful woman, she was a pastor from up in Comox, Campbell River, Tessa. Huh. She felt that God told her to come and spend some time with me, and she did, and she did that. And there was another group of people that came around me, and then there was some First Nations elders from different First Nations in this area who came around, and then one First Nations elder came and spent quite a bit of time with me, and she asked me, tell me exactly what you see. And I did. I told her what I was seeing. And she said to me, you're describing exactly, this is before contact. This was what had happened when the Haida came down to Lekwungen territory. What you're describing to me is that exactly in detail. And I didn't know what I was seeing or hearing, or I just knew that I couldn't sleep most nights. It was so violent, and it was around that time I started to become really physically ill. I was carrying a lot of stuff on me that was on the land. That was another thing that taught me about how important it is to do cleanses before you go into a place and after you. I'd been taught about doing cleanses after doing spiritual work with people, spiritual readings or counseling. I had been taught a lot of this stuff through Elijah House. I'd been trained through Elijah House and through Stream Ministries. I'd been taught through Stream. And so I learned a lot of things that would probably most people, the teaching of the mystics, things that were within Christendom, but very much about things about the mystics. And so I knew about making sure to cleanse, but for some reason I didn't do that when I came here, and I learned it much more with much more intention about how important that was, to make sure that when I went into a place and when I left a place that I cleansed, asked for protection and asked for cleansing. And that can seem like a lot of information. If you're sitting there right now and you've never heard any of this before, you're like, what the heck is she talking about? And I really hope that I've been clear in describing it enough so that it is understandable. It's when we go into a new place to ask for protection, whatever spiritual entity we might believe in, or just even any if that isn't how it works, but just to have a little bit of understanding that energy stays in place, can stay in places. It's, like, a sore neck. Well, how does that happen? Well, there was maybe there was an accident and energy came into our neck, and now we have this sore. It can be as like a physical thing, and it can be on land, and it can be in buildings. And I'm not talking, now some people might call that demonic or whatever, but for me, it's more of an energetic thing. And so it's just, I had to learn to understand and to respect that there are things that I don't understand, and there's things that I don't know. And so I ask for protection when I go in for a place. I just ask for a covering. I do it my way, and other people do it their ways. And then when I leave a place, to ask for anything that I might have picked up that is not mine to carry to be cleansed from me. And so I didn't understand how important that was until this started to just rattle me to my core, when I was hearing voices. And I don't mean voices as in a person with schizophrenia. I would be hearing and seeing things much like in a revelatory fashion, more like in a movie in my head playing, just seeing the history of the place without ever being told it. And then having a really beautiful, kind, gracious, wise elder from one of the communities in this area come and say to me, what is it that you see? What's going on for you? And when I told her, and then she told me what it was, well, one of the things, something clicked, and it kind of undid the hold that it had over me. The other thing that it did was it told me I didn't feel ready. I didn't feel ready to carry that kind of information. So I asked that it would stop, and I started rejecting it when it would come. I started putting my hand up and saying, I don't want to see anymore. I can't. It had got too much. It had been a lifetime of it, and I was tired. And, I've taken over a decade off, really, about relating, and now I'm just very slowly allowing things to come back. And I feel like what I'm called to do in the midst of that is to share that information, to share my experiences, and to share the wisdom and the knowledge that I've gained through really incredible people who have mentored me in this. Now, we would have called it, at that time, mentoring it in the prophetic. And I'll still call it that for me. Intuitive, revelatory, could be psychic to some. Second sight, I like it. I like to call that second sight. But there's a whole bunch of people out there, and you're walking in this. And I feel really led to start to share about my knowledge in this, because I was blessed to be mentored and trained by incredible people who walked in a lot of authority and walked in wisdom and kindness and grace. And they were so generous as to share this information with me. I was given free schooling in Streams Ministries, where John Paul Jackson had, he's passed now, but he was a world-known prophet and went all around the world teaching. And I was given all of his training. It was a gift. Eric Cooper did that. I'll never forget that. And I was given all of the Elijah House teachings, and so many others that most of it was gifted to me. And, being mentored under Dr. Tom Saunders, just people who were incredible and kind and wise. And I learned so much. And now I feel like I have this platform, and it's time for me to be sharing the things that I've learned. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to start to really share a lot about what I learned and some of the experiences. I mean, we've barely touched on the experiences that I have had. Let me finish with a really lovely, kind, and wonderful one. I had a dream. Well, first of all, I was a huge, huge fan of Mavis Staples, of the Staples singers. If you think of, she was I mean, she's still a touring musician and amazing. And back in the 60s and 70s, I mean, she's been in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She's, you know, she traveled with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She's just an incredible human and a gifted vocalist. And some people going, who's Mavis Staples? Google her. You've got a computer. You're listening to me. I know a place, ain't nobody crying. You know, I'll take you there. You know that, or respect yourself. If you don't respect yourself, ain't nobody gonna give a goo to who. Na 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 na. Okay, those are just a couple of her songs, and I don't have much of a voice right now, but anyways. So I had long just loved this woman and gone to all her concerts anytime I could, but I had a dream one night. And in my dream, uh, Mavis Staples passed her mantle down to me, which is a lot of mantle, meaning the authority that they walk in, their gifting. That's kind of what the mantle is about. And so I thought, oh my gosh. So she was coming into town and I already had my tickets, and I was like, okay, this is going to be it. I'm going to meet Mavis Staples and this is going to happen. And it didn't happen. And then a few people had shared with me that they had started to have dreams about that this was going to happen with me. And so then one day, Dave, my husband, came and said, hey, look, you know, Mavis Staples, she's going to be playing up at the Vancouver Island Music Festival. I think you're supposed to go up. I think this is going to be the thing. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole big, long story about it, because I'm already running out of time here for this episode, but I will. I will tell you that big, long story one day. A person that I knew, she came up with me, and we went to this thing together, and I went and said, I have this message from Mavis Staples. That was a message that I was given about her being the original crossover artist and all that she had done for so many people, and opening up spiritual music in pop culture and rock and blues and all of that. And I just had this message that I felt that God wanted me to share with her. So those doors were open for me. Sky, my friend Sky, it was just this whole thing that literally is going to take me like 45 minutes to tell you the story. But here's the deal. I had that dream. I had that vision. And that morning that I went to go up there, I had a dream that day, and it said, this day you will receive her mantle. And I was like, whoa. So that's her. I went, the concert was on, and we saw her play, and you know, it was getting close. It was like 10:30 or almost 11 o'clock at night. I thought, well, this day means like midnight it ends. It's not going to happen, but man. Well, that's a whole other story that I am going to share about it. Let me just tell you the short story of this part is that through the crowd, this big, beautiful black man comes walking. It's her bass player, and he comes and says, Miss Allie. And he took me back to meet Mavis Staples. My friend Sky had, well, that part of the story will be another day, but had met up with someone and said, you know, my friend needs to talk to Mavis Staples, and she made that happen for me, man. I'll never forget her for it. But I went through and I spent over an hour with Mavis Staples that night, and we talked and we laughed and we cried and we prayed together, and it was an incredible thing. And she said to me, Miss Allie, I'm not sure that I fully understand what you're talking about with a mantle, but I think, and she said it with her accent, I think you want some of what I got. And then she told me these words, and I will never forget. She said to me, I'll pray for you, and I will do that, but I just want to tell you that you don't need anything from me. She said, Miss Allie, you walk into Alison from Victoria. That's what she was calling me. Alison from Victoria. You walk into a room and it just lights up. There's nothing that I've got that you need. Because whatever it is that you're going to do, God already put that in you. But I'll pray with you. So I had that dream and I followed it, and I believed in my heart that that was the truth, and I followed it. And by that time, I had a wee bit of maturity in me that I could do that without messing it up too bad. In fact, when I got into her dressing room with her and I was so nervous, I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to say? I was just this giant of a woman, which is really funny because she's so tiny. She's so tiny. I was towering her and I'm only 5'5". And I just had to get it together. And I took a breath and I said, Miss Staples, I am so sorry. I just need to try to calm myself because I understand you're just a person, but to me, you're just such an important person. And I really feel like I have a message for you and that I've come for something that God has told me that you would give me. And I just really need to calm myself so that I can share that message with you properly. She said to me, oh, honey, it's just like when I met Lena Horne. I waited my whole life to meet her. And then when I did, I just stood there like a dummy because I was so excited to meet her. I didn't know what to say. She said, so it's just Mavis. You calm yourself down and you just know it's just Mavis. You can just take your time and tell me whatever you need to tell me. It's going to be okay. And it was. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. Not because she's a big star and I waited to meet her, but because I believed in my heart that this thing that was bigger than me was going to happen, and it did. And so that's another part of why I want to do this, is because there's a whole bunch of you out there and you're gifted, beautiful beings. And if there's anything that I have inside of me that I could share with you that would bring that to fruition, then I would like to do that. Whew. So, having said that, tune in because there will be much more of this to come. And thank you for listening. I do hope that you like and that you subscribe and that you come back and that we can share together more. And I would love to hear your stories. I would love for you to comment and to tell me the great things that are happening in your life and the not so great things and all of it. Because really, we're just all walking this life out together and just trying to get home. Take good care. Know that you're loved. And do find your joy. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you found a piece of your joy in this episode, I would love to hear about what came up for you so that we can continue to grow the impact of this show. Thanks again. See you soon. And remember, find your joy.